Okay, thank you very much indeed, Ben and everybody for your very successful participation. It was a wonderful result getting to that stage. The theme for our 3 days is Crisis and Commemoration, Europe in 2014, and I think just from an Australian perspective alone, we would be very aware of the significance of Europe in this particular period of time, looking back 100 years. And as our program will demonstrate, for Europe, it's a very important period for many reasons. Today we're starting with a more specific theme of crisis and conciliation in contemporary Europe. And part of the purpose of today is to refresh some of the background that you already have, but also to connect you with some of the current debates about the European Union and about the challenges which it faces. In this first session from here, in terms of presentations, we have two, and I'm going to introduce both at once and we hope that they will do a fairly seamless transition between each other, leaving us with maybe 15-20 minutes for some questions and conversation now, which we might pick up again and come back to later in the day as well. So let me firstly introduce Professor Pascaline Winand. You have her bio in your paperwork, but as it says very briefly, she's director of the Monash European and EU Centre. She's published widely on the EU and its external relations. Most recently, I think, on India.
Yes.
Yeah, it's coming. Degrees in political science, international relations and diplomatic history from the ULB, Yale University and Purdue, and has taught at several universities in Europe. Since 2009, she is the Jean Monnet Chair in European Integration and International Relations at Monash and postgraduate of the Master's Program at Monash. Sitting on my left and shortly to come in front of you is Anne-Marie Elijah, who has Deputy Director at the ANU Centre for European Studies since last year, since 2013. Previously worked as a policy officer in the Australian Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet and taught politics at universities in Australia and New Zealand. Her PhD looked at the implications of British membership of the European Community for Australia. And I must say that over the last few years I've particularly enjoyed learning about Anne-Marie's research on the way in which Australia and New Zealand have gone through a steady integrative process that offers many points for reflection and comparison with the European Union process of integration. So that might be something we can get you onto sometime in the next day or so. Firstly, to Pascaline, and Pascaline's topic is, what is Europe? Social, political and historical frameworks. Over to you. And I shall be strict, Pascaline, just to warn you now.
Lisa, welcome to all of you. I am not going to cover all of the wonderful aspects that you just mentioned because it's too much in 20 minutes. What I'm going to do is present you a tool that you can all use in your classroom. And I have to give you the background to this. It was developed first. You have all the names, all the people who contributed to this PowerPoint. It was started by an intern that we had at the Monash European EU Centre, a French intern. And then we got a bit of money from the EU delegation in Canberra, also from the Department of Education, to present this PowerPoint in Melbourne, but also in Canberra, in some schools. So we tested it in a way. And since then, we've updated it. And last time we had a summer school here. I think that some of you used it in the classroom. It's very much, you can take parts of this, you can take the whole thing if you want. It's there to spark discussion. And as you'll see, there's also some interactive bits in it. So it's a good starting point. I think you'll all have it either on your USB pen or it will be available on our website. There was still an update being done last night, actually. So this is what it talks about. So it's an introduction. There's also historical steps. I'll also give you a website right at the end of the presentation where you can find testimonies from participants. So you can listen to people who played a large role in European integration. They've been recorded by Centre Virtuel de la Connaissance en Europe. But if you don't know French, don't worry about it. They have also an English version of their site, and a lot of those interviews are also in English or have been translated. back apparently. Okay, well. Look, I'll do my best to project a bit more, but it doesn't seem to be. Yeah, it is working. Yeah, I think it is. Okay, so maybe I will. Yeah. Is it better? Perfect. I'll give you the website. It's very interesting, and you can then perhaps interweave this in this presentation. So we start by saying who we are. So in my case, well, I'm Belgian, I have many identities. Maybe you could do, some of you also have, I don't know, French ancestry or whatever. So I'm Belgian, I'm European. My father's, somebody asked me where I was from in Belgium. My father's from both the Walloon and Flemish parts of Belgium, and I was born in Brussels. My mother is from France and Austria, so I'm definitely a mixture. And then I've studied and taught in many different countries. So I explained a little bit about Belgium, the special situation. But again, so it depends on your own background, and that way you can start a conversation with the students. Then what is the EU? A brief introduction. I won't say too much, because I think Anne-Marie is going to also cover some of this. So what is it? Not a state, not Europe, 28 member states with the exception of Croatia. If we look at the population, this could be the occasion here to discuss the size of the different countries. This is very important for the European Union. In negotiation, during treaties, for example, the small member states, middle member states, the large member states, and how do you negotiate a balance between all these different member states? How do you become a member of the EU? And then we can go into some examples. Turkey is an interesting example, but you can talk for hours about Turkey. So that's something you might want to look into. So there are many member states and there are EU institutions, many policies, many players, non-governmental actors. I've done quite a lot of study about this. What do people speak? So you have the working languages in EU institutions, but then you have 24 languages. And citizens can ask for any document in their own language. So again, that would be of interest for those of you who teach languages, for example. Then European Union symbols. You can already click on this link and you can take it over to join by Beethoven. The flag, the 12 stars, you can have a discussion why there are 12 stars, there's all kinds of things I can talk about here. The Schuman Declaration. Again, if you go on the side of the CBC, you can actually listen to Robert Schuman. They have all of this online, so you can click on it and just listen to him. And it's interesting to remember that when he made this declaration, nobody expected that this was going to be anything really important. But also they sent second-tier journalists to this event, and then it was like a bombshell. It was something really, really important. But nobody expected this at the time. And so the motto, United in Diversity. Why the European Union? And so it's a long tradition, rarely peaceful, we could say, so you can discuss all of this if you want. The war trauma, and then from there you can definitely then perhaps have a transition to the Nobel Peace Prize perhaps later on as well, but there's going to be a presentation about that. So the case for modern union. So this was then definitely, we're trying to address specific problems at the time. What's happened now? Why is there a European Union today? And the question is always, why does it continue to exist? So that's one of the questions you might want to address. The historic steps towards the European Union. I'm a specialist here, so I could go on for hours, but just some steps. So when you said 1957, yes, but of course there was the first European Coal and Steel Community. And so here you can see Robert Schuman. Then the 1957, you have two new communities, the EC, the Euratom Atomic Energy Community. Who are the 6 founding members? You give the founding members, then you ask people to found one of the map. So we've done this in the past, in which you don't need a lot of technology. You can come, with a stick, and people, point it. It's quite interesting what people come up with. This is easy. Usually students find that one. So then you give them the answer, of course. And then you have the first enlargement. So usually that's easy to find as well. Then it gets more complicated with other enlargements, of course. So you can do this with your students and have some fun with that. Then you have the first direct election to the European Parliament. The Parliament wasn't very powerful at the time, so we can discuss that as well. So what happened with these elections? What's happening now? There's going to be elections again this year, so you can talk about what it could mean today. The first Mediterranean enlargement. So again, you asked to find those on the map, not too difficult so far. Okay, and then the single market. Why did we work to have a single market? Why was it important for President of the European Commission, Jacques Delors? And Jacques Delors had a lot of prestige because he was also seen as perhaps the next president of France, right? Didn't happen, so you can also discuss these particular issues. The fall of the Berlin Wall and what this means later on for the reunification of Germany. Who wanted it, who didn't want it? A lot of interesting stuff has come out on this. So the Treaty of Maastricht, which establishes the European Union, you can go into all kinds of details about this. At that time, the EU does not have a legal prosthetic. That's probably too complicated for the students yet, but you can perhaps, we can make it very simple or complicated, depending on the level of the students. Then we have Nordic enlargement here. So can you find this on the map again? The road to the euro. So here again, you can give a lot of detail, but not so much. It's interesting to see that the euro is introduced, but you don't necessarily feel you don't have the coins and the banknotes right away. So you had a time lag. And I remember when I was in the US, people just marveled at just this new euro thing. I had to make a presentation back then. So there was a lot of excitement at the time. So we can also talk about why they're designed the way they are, or different stories like that. Right. Then you can have another game here. What is the value of €1? This fluctuates quite a bit. So now the euro is a bit stronger than it was a few months ago, so we had to adapt to all this. So how much does a French baguette cost, in euros? We have that quiz, a spaghetti, a train ticket. That's kind of fun to do. And then you have the largest enlargement of all. That gets complicated. And we could do another test then, I think. See who can find all of these different countries. The Eastern enlargement. So I broke it down in several parts. So, and then the European Union is still work in progress, right? It's still being debated. Yes, there was a no from two of the original founding members on the referendum implementing the treaty establishing a constitution for Europe. What were the problems? I'm married to an Irishman, for example, so we had some problems in Ireland as well. So you can discuss all of this, and I think it's very interactive with the students. So two more for the Eastern enlargement. Then we have the Lisbon Treaty. We can talk about the Lisbon Treaty, the similarities between the Constitutional Treaty and the Lisbon Treaty. Very, very similar, but a few things are different nonetheless. Latest accession, we just talked about that. I don't know, but there was a question on the test about that.
No,
there wasn't. Anyway, so that's the map today. Could change in the future. Then you can talk about the latest development, the Eurozone crisis. Everybody's heard about that in Australia. There are many ways to tell the story. This is the way Alfonso updated the slides as the last name in the list. So you can add your name, if you want to use this to the Eurozone crisis. I'm not going to do this. So we can look at some of the latest economic indicators. The official employment rate is an interesting story. And then more for positive story, the Nobel Peace Prize. But again, you can actually go on the websites of the Nobel Institute and find reactions to the Nobel Peace Prize. There are positive ones and very negative ones as well, so it's quite interesting to see the reactions to you getting the Nobel Peace Prize. And you can start a discussion again here. Then the institutions. Well, it's hard to talk about the EU institutions, but you can make it exciting just by talking about the people behind those institutions. The European Parliament, again, so it's in 2 different locations. José Manuel Barroso, the President of the European Commission. It's not his first term, he's been there for quite some time. The European Council as well. And so you have the European Council President, Catherine Ashton, who does a very difficult job. She has like so many different hats. You can tell she's a Wonder Woman, I think. I'm sorry for the picture, they're not the best pictures, but they really do a wonderful job. Then you have other actors who can talk about the fact that perhaps not all of the actors are located in Brussels, they're in different locations. What does the EU do? Just give us some examples here. You could talk about the common agricultural policy, very important to Australia for a while. And why we have a common agricultural policy. There's a lot of good historical work that's come out about its history. Environmental issues as well, very important, most likely to your students as well. Common rights, you could show your European passports if you have one, but just see what it means. Education, we mentioned Erasmus. I think most of you got that right with that particular question. So there is Erasmus Mundus, which is available for students around the world now, so I think that's very important. I did show this movie to my students at some point, L'Auberge Espagnole, so that's one way of making things concrete again. And then you can focus on EU-Australian relations. That's up to you whether you start with that or we used to start with that. In this version, Alfonso has chosen to put it more towards the end. So it can talk about the tyranny of distance, the first European contact, for example, the percentage of Australians that can claim European ancestry, and then more recent developments. So that's important. How many Australians travel to Europe, for example? So you can, here, to find some of the latest figures, you can go to DFAT and find a lot of the information there. EU-Australia relations, I don't know if you know this, but since you got the date right of 1962, I think most of you did, there was a celebration, 50 years of European Union-Australian relations recently. So you can talk about the relationship, there were misunderstandings, but at the same time, these regions of a high economic relevance, and there are also many cultural ties, right? So we put some numbers here for you to show the importance of the relationship. But again, you can go to the website of the delegation, of the EU delegation, also DFAT, to update this or to give it the focus that you want. New partnerships, so again, you can look at what's been happening here. An intensification of exchanges. Here we have the visit of Barroso to Canberra, and I remember this quite well because all of the youth centers directors were invited to the event. So we listened to the speeches of Barroso, Julia Gillard, and also Tony Abbott. So this, you can make this very concrete in a way. So the joint activities. Many joint activities. For instance, there is a lot of aid coordination in the Asia-Pacific region, where really Australia and the EU trust one another and also delegate to one another the aid coordination. Then you can also go beyond the EU and talk about other European integration topics. So you can talk about NATO, for example. I've been asked to write a book on US-EU-NATO relations. It's very interesting to see the links between the EU and NATO, for example. You could talk about the Schengen zone as well. You could talk about football, very important as well. This is another way to look at Europe too. And then you can talk, yes, about the Eurovision. So you could have several maps, of Europe. According to your focus. So we'll see who wins this year. As I understand it, Australia is one of the most enthusiastic countries outside of Europe, you know, for the Eurovision contest. It's amazing the level of enthusiasm actually. So, and that's it. So you can, you know, add on to this. It's been done many times before. Make it your own, you know, choose perhaps only one section, whatever you want to do. And then I had this last link to the CVCE. This will be available from our website, the latest. So the CVCE, just have a look and look at these videos online. I think your students would love to listen to participants talking about how they experience all of that. They also have prepared some packages for teachers as well, which you can download. Very useful. You could also suggest to them to prepare certain packages for you. That's quite possible as well. So that's it. And now I think Anne-Marie, and I think I didn't.
Perfect.